We're going to get ready to get this show on the road because this is an emergency thought session, and we're so very glad that everyone has joined. The Reparation Information Thought Series is a periodic strategic webinar featuring reparations experts, racial justice thought leaders, and more engaged in critical conversation, discussion, reflection, and analysis on issues pertinent to the movement for reparatory justice in the United States and abroad. It is co hosted by myself, Nkechi Taifa, Executive Director of the Reparation Education Project, as well as my colleague Jessica Ann Mitchell Aiwuyor, Executive Director of the National Black Cultural Information Trust. We've been going strong for about a little over 2 years now. And this 2025 series, we are having this very pertinent discussion on an issue of contemporary interest. And so, with that, we're going to be talking about the issue of Maryland's veto, the governor of Maryland's veto of the passage of the Maryland Reparations Commission bill. And we have an illustrious panel for us today, as well as a special guest. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Jessica, who we affectionately call Jam, who's going to give some framing, and then we're going to start our discussion. Okay, so we have the esteemed Barbara Arnwine, Executive Director of the Transformative Justice Coalition. We have my dear brother, Robert Stubblefield, who is an organizer with the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. We have our dear sister, Dreisen Heath, who is the convener of the Why We Can't Wait Network. And we will have the Reverend Dr. JoAnne Braxton, who is the president of the Braxton Institute and representing reparations for Lakeland now. We have a special guest, which will be Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, the chair of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus, who will join us in the second part of the discussion. And we will have you as well, the audience, who will be able to join the discussion via Q&A in the Q&A box. So with that, I want to turn it to my co-host, Jessica Ann Mitchell, Aiwuyor, National Black Cultural Information Trust, who's going to give us some framing remarks before we begin our panel. Take it away, Jam.
Thanks, Nkechi, and thank you everyone for joining us last minute, basically, for this really important conversation that we're having. So, basically, for years, Maryland based activists and organizations and communities have been pushing for forms of reparations in the state of Maryland, and we're advancing bills to have a reparations commission in the state. And the reparations bill SB 587 for the state government Maryland Reparations Commission passed through the Maryland General Assembly. And that was a major accomplishment and inroad after all these years advocating for reparations in the state of Maryland. It could have become law if the governor signed it or even if he didn't sign it. But instead, Governor Westmore chose to veto the bill, which led to a lot of confusion because of the way in which he framed his veto. So I have his letter pulled up. To save time, I won't try to share my screen. But basically, within his letter, he says that the context in which I've made this difficult decision is that I strongly believe now is not the time for another study. And now is the time for continued action that delivers results for the people we serve. And so basically, he states that he thinks that we have done enough studies within the state. He cites the revival of different Black-owned businesses, the reversal and pardoning of Maryland convictions for cannabis possession, and support for HBCUs. So he thinks that these are indicators of progress, and that there are urgent needs, and that a reparations commission isn't urgent enough. And so this caused a lot of different confusion for supporters of reparations, because while some were upset that the governor vetoed the bill, others were saying, no, he's actually for reparations, and he wants us to get to reparations faster than the commission, and we don't need any more studies. And so this conversation that we're having today is to clarify what exactly a reparations commission or study is, the purpose, and why we actually need an override of the veto in order to move forward with reparations in the state of Maryland.
So thank you so very much, Jam, for that overview and those framing remarks. We're going to just jump right into the conversation with our panelists. So our first question is, why is the establishment of a statewide reparations commission in Maryland so critical at this particular moment in history? And we're going to keep our remarks brief, but who wants to start with that question? Let me just introduce one more time our panelists, because I see quite a number of people have joined since I originally introduced them. We have Barbara Arnwine, who is the executive director of the Transformative Justice Coalition. We have Dreisen Heath, who is the convener of the Why We Can't Wait network. We have Robert Stubblefield, who is the organizer with the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. And joining us in the second half will be Reverend Dr. JoAnne Braxton, president of the Braxton Institute, and also a representative from Lakeland now, as well as Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, who is the chair of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus, who will be our special guest. So who wants to tackle that first question? Why is the establishment of a statewide reparations commission in Maryland so very critical at this particular moment in history?
I would like to start off if I can.
Okay, Robert Stubblefield, you got it.
So thank you. So basically, the reason why establishment of a statewide commission is so important is look what's happening across the country. We're seeing not only the erasure of our histories, but the erasure of that impact on our history. And Maryland is no different. You know, a lot of people talk about essentially why is it Maryland is leading the nation in terms of Black incarceration. Well, you know, Reparations Commission will help answer that question. So that's why a commission is like that, of that importance, is so critical at this juncture, because we need to, you know, establish where we can go by where we come from. That's why it's important.
Thank you so very much, Robert. Who else wants to respond?
This is Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Nkechi, for pulling together this great meeting. My answer is very simple. It's because it's legally required. It's not like any state or any entity can take what's called race conscious action without a predicate being laid. The predicate is the study. It's absolutely mandatory. Otherwise, you can put together, you know, the best reparations program in the universe, but if you haven't done the hearings, the compilation, the documentation, the pros and cons, and had all of that discussion and dialogue, the program is invalid. It will be ruled unconstitutional and invalid in a second. It is absolutely, to me, so irresponsible. This is a governor that I was admiring from afar, for quite a while, but it's irresponsible what he said, because he knows, he has to know. There's no way on earth his attorney general has not told him that under U.S. constitutional law, 14th Amendment jurisprudence, that you must have a predicate, that you have to do a study. It's mandatory. It's not optional. And anybody who's been thinking about, am I right? Just look at the Shelby decision. Look from 1989, look at the Croson decision, which all lays out these requirements. So this is nothing new. I mean, Crow since 1989, Shelby's 2013. So I purposefully didn't want to start with all the legal issues. That's why I let somebody else answer first. But it's legally required. That's the most important, most fundamental reality here.
Thank you so very much, Barbara. Let's hear from Dreisen now. Dreisen Heath, Why We Can't Wait Network.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate this timely, critical discussion. Grateful to be with my esteemed colleagues as well. In addition to what Attorney Arnwine and Robert offered us, Maryland has about, a little under 2 million Black people in the state, and that's 30% of the population. So just even thinking about the various states that are advancing reparations commissions, Maryland has a higher percentage of a Black population. And, in 1755, the population of Black people who were mostly enslaved, Black people who were mostly enslaved was 40%, right? So we are hovering around minus 10%. But we're talking about a huge constituency of Black folks that are being impacted. And we're talking about a state on the Mason-Dixon line. And so when we're thinking about the cluster of DC, Maryland, Virginia, and some of the, gravest origins of these crimes and it's the continuing crimes against Black people, Maryland, who is very much known for Maryland culture, very much being Black culture, this is undeniable in terms of needing to properly diagnose the legacy of enslavement and the range of harms here to deliver an appropriate and comprehensive remedy.
Okay, thank you so very much, Dreisen. And before I turn it over to Jam to elicit the next question, I just want to say that I put in the chat a recent article that I did called A Tale of Two Responses. One moves toward repair, the other retreats. That gives a comparison with respect to the recent Tulsa mayor's proclamation and the recent Maryland governor's veto. So, Jam, we can go on with the next question for our panelists.
Sure. So what message does Governor Moore's veto send, not just to Marylanders, but to the national reparations movement? Anyone could start.
I mean, this veto was a complete regression, right? There was support from the governor and, of course, from the Black Caucus, the Legislative Black Caucus in Maryland, the largest legislative Black caucus in the country, who prioritized reparations in their past legislative session. And so, it's important to know that, Moore, he did veto this on May 16th, which is the day after a major federal reparations now legislation was introduced by Representative Summer Lee out of Pennsylvania. And so just even that catalytic effect of a state veto drowning out the momentum at the federal level, and ultimately this commission being very much a federal framework. So all of these state commissions that have popped up, including the proposed Maryland Commission, are what we know as HR 40 S40. It's a copycat HR 40 commission. So the federal framework is being applied to these states and these locales. And so effectively, too, you're rejecting a federal framework that has created local momentum and has actually, produced material outcomes for people in local jurisdictions. But it also, just again, more generally around the national reparations movement and even its impact on other states that are considering reparations proposals and commissions right now. You have the state of Massachusetts that may have enough political sway in the next session to advance its reparations bill. You had the state of Washington that was literally considering in that same time $300,000 to appropriate to their commission right after the veto. Luckily, that money was approved for Washington State Commission and will, proceed. But you also have Oregon State and other states that have been tinkering around the edges and thinking about this. So it sends a grave, signal to the larger movement. And it also divides the Black electorate based off of what Governor Moore said was his excuse of vetoing. Ultimately, if you're, about action, you can do that. Present day, nothing is stopping you from tackling the harms of enslavement today. So yeah, we're in a really precarious spot where we're also battling this narrative that's fueling white resentment already. White resentment and the right wing want anything to fuel their fire around anti-reparations, around anti-Black people in general. And this veto certainly does not help our battles against that as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Go
And
ahead, Robert.
and I would just like to add on to the fact that basically it's a slap in the face. Because here's the same governor who will say, I stand on the shoulders of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Parent Mitchell, and yet you are basically slapping in the face of their sacrifices of what they fought for, what their descendants fought for, what many advocates have been fighting for. And I would like to use this, and Sister Dreisen said it all, like how this may affect other commissions, that other states and localities are affecting it. And the thing that I would like to say, if I can address his veto letter real quick, is everything that he said is addressing future harm, right? Like entrepreneurship and HBCUs. What we're talking about is addressing the past harms that currently affect what's the current situation, right? And so you can't say you study history and fail to understand that history is never past; it's always present and it always impacts the future. So it's a really the long and short of it is that it does set us back it does set us back a little bit. It's a slap in the face, and that we have to remember this come 2026 because he's running for re-election, and he's doing that because whether he wants to admit it or not, he is eyeing eyeing the presidency, and he's willing to sacrifice real power for his own personal gain. So long and short, it's a slap in the face.
Yes, and I thank you, Robert, and thank you, Dreisen. I think that the greatest sin of what he did was the miseducation, because and the presidents. I mean, he's the only Black governor sitting, right? And it's easy for people to point to the Black governor and say, "Well, he won't do it. Why are you bothering us?" And I was so glad when Washington State did not stumble, after his veto, but still, it will have that negativity. I was very, let's say, moved to see people in South Carolina complaining about how this affects, their work at that level. And basically, his statement, as was pointed out, doesn't talk about Maryland's unclean hands, does it? Because Maryland has a tremendously ugly racial record. And it's not just, decades ago. I mean, I was involved in the litigation of the Coalition for Equity and Excellence and Maryland higher education lawsuit. And that lawsuit was filed in 2006. It was 2006, 21st century, folks, was not resolved until 2016. No, I'm sorry, 2021, 4 years ago. It was not resolved until 2021. And that lawsuit was calling Maryland to task because they deliberately and purposefully set out to not only underfund the HBCUs, the higher, education, the Black higher educational institutions in this country, in this state, but they also did something that was just rotten and vicious. Ooh, every time I would read the files, it would just drive me crazy. When Morgan State and the other HBCUs would propose some kind of radically forward-thinking program like a biotech program or a computer tech program, way ahead of all these other predominantly white institutions, they would say to those Black institutions, great idea, but you can't run the program. We're going to literally steal your idea and give it to one of the white institutions, which is what they did. So that the white institution had a greater capacity of attracting students who wanted to be on the cutting edge of technology, the cutting edge of mathematics, the cutting edge of science, and denied that opportunity to those Black colleges. And universities. It was just there was just no justification for it. It was inconceivable that somebody would think that was righteous. It was racist to the core. And we settled that lawsuit for $577 million, which we would love to have settled it for higher, right? So I just want to, be very clear that the injuries that Maryland has undertaken to hurt its African Americans population, to deprive that population of its, opportunities for excellence, its opportunity for achievement, its opportunity for anything approaching equality is long. Our statement, we issued a statement in opposition to the veto, and the statement also is a call for the override of that veto, and we list a lot of these historical injustices. And that's why you need the study commission, because the study commission would list them all and would go through, all the lynchings, would go through all the, absolute laws that were on, prohibiting education of Blacks. It would talk about, all the way up to these redlining cases that were filed in this century. To the transportation cases that were filed in this century. All of that, because of racial discrimination, all of that would be talked about. All of that would be documented. It would be a firm and strong basis for having a comprehensive, widespread, whole cloth response to the discrimination and to justify the repair. The reparations can't stand without people really fully understanding what has happened, and his action miseducated this whole nation. It was a mistake, and to posit it as something really bold. I'm so big and bad, I don't need a study. People don't fall for it. It's just absolutely unacceptable. And you can't sustain it. You cannot sustain such a position.
Okay, but Barbara, thank you so very much. I'm going to go on to the next question. And it is, how do you respond to the position that Maryland has already sufficiently studied the issue and now it's a time for action? And the way I want to do this, Barbara, I want you to respond last because I know you need to leave. And I want you to also look at the other questions to see if there's anything else you want to weld into that answer, because I know you need to leave. And I know Reverend Dr. Braxton has just joined us. So I'm going to have her start with the next question that we talk about, not this particular one. So if Dreisen, Robert, and then Barbara can respond to the question, how do you respond to the position that Maryland has already sufficiently studied the issue and now is the time for action? And Reverend Braxton, we're going to pick you up with the following question after that. So who wants to, Robert or Dreisen, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, so I would say that is total BS. And what I say about that is that, yes, I agree it's time for some action, but in order for us to get to that action, you have to have a plan, right? And that's what this commission was going to do. It's going to establish a study and a comprehensive holistic, at least I believe, a comprehensive plan to achieve it, right? By him, I think I mentioned this in my previous answer, by him pointing to entrepreneurship programs and HBCU investment, as well as other programs that are already available in the state. But the problem with that, though, is that how many people know about these programs? How many people are even eligible for those programs? And more importantly, those programs are available for everybody. You know, this, reparations is a specific cure to cure a specific problem, and so for him to try to even gouge this and try and offer, yes, I agree, it's time for a study, it's time for some action, not more studies, but other states have done studies. We have yet to even truly begin to understand like slavery and redlining's impact on the state of Maryland. So that's pretty much my response.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Robert. My first thought about this is that we need to do more political education work on what reparations are and what that process of reparations entails. Right. To me, this is a clear example of a person in leadership who doesn't even know what this process is for, and is citing examples that are, general welfare to Black Americans, not necessarily specificity in relation to an intentional harm. And so yes, we can point to Black entrepreneurship and HBCUs, but there's historically been a disinvestment in that as a part of the government's regular operations. That's then separate from these, traceable, intentional laws, policies, and practices that have disenfranchised people, Black people in particular, in relation to chattel slavery, post-emancipation harms, and ongoing discrimination. It also, to me, raises a red flag, even again, around our understanding of reparations, not just being for intentional violence, but for neglect. Like this is going to have to, this decision in and of itself is the debt is being calculated every day for Black Marylanders. So to put this off additional time means that the injury is being compounded. And previous studies and commissions about Maryland's Black history, or even the discrete nature of the valiant work in the Maryland Lynching and Reconciliation Commission, that lacks a mandate that's, those are different processes than the mandate of SB 587, right? This is to create a specific framework for reparations with clear implementation mechanisms. Those other studies do not have that same mandate. So this whole, study versus action thing is really a false binary. I like to co-sign Brother Robert on, it being BS, because you have to have this rigorous analysis and investigation, as Attorney Arnwine is speaking so clearly about, and you have to have these concrete institutional and policy proposals, something that Maryland has not achieved yet.
Okay, thank you. Barbara Arnwine?
Yeah, I join wholeheartedly in my other panelists, statements, and I just want to, just add a couple other things, just really quickly. There's a horrible case, everybody. It's called Shelby versus Holder. Came out in fact, the 13th anniversary of the case is coming up this year, and on June 25th. And we actually will be having actions all over the country about our continued opposition to the Shelby case, and calling on Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Because you might recall in 2013, the Roberts Court eviscerated what we call Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act, which basically required all jurisdictions that had a history of racial discrimination in voting to get approval from the federal governments or the federal courts before they imposed any change, any new law, any new procedure in voting to make sure it wouldn't be discriminatory. It was a very proactive, very powerful mechanism. We estimated it prevented over 50,000 instances of racial discrimination in voting just based on the cases that were filed, not to mention its deterrent effect. Well, one of the things that the court said when they struck down the voting section 4B of the new 2006 reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act was that they said that one of the reasons why they struck it down was that there were no specific hearings. Did you hear me? No specific hearings by the federal Congress on that particular provision. What the law has been telling us, and it's all screwed, I don't agree with any of it, it's wrong, but anyway, it's American jurisprudence. It doesn't exist in other countries. They are much better on these issues than we are, but it requires that you show the injury and that you have to show a nexus between that injury and the remedy that you are proposing. And basically, the remedial context is what the hearings, what the study commission was set up. And that is what our problem is that he should know that he can't do anything that's race conscious. As some of the speakers have pointed out, you can do general stuff. But if you're going to be race conscious and you're going to say, I want to repair this injury done to Black folks, you better have a basis where you've had hearings. And you can't just put together a whole list of studies. You got to actually have a commission that does deep probing and deep hearings, where they have witnesses, where they have witnesses for and against. You got to do it. I'm sorry. It's legally required. There's no other option in this particular era of our life. I just want to end, my presence here by just saying to everybody, our fight is long. We've had, African-American leaders on the right side and the wrong side. I'm very proud of what the new mayor in Tulsa did. That was pointed out. That took some boldness. We've had great leaders out of Springfield, Illinois, and a whole lot of other places. But we got to make it clear to Moore, with his presidential ambitions, that he has to get right on this issue. Because he had alternatives. There are things he could have done. He could have said, if in fact he disagrees with this, he could have used his executive power after the creation of the commission to direct what he wants done specifically. He had alternatives other than using a widespread veto. So his posture right now is wrong. It's one that we got to change. I hope, Nkechi, as I leave, that everybody will join us. Not only this Saturday as we protest around No Kings because of our issues with this president, but I hope people will join us on July 17th when TJC and many other organizations will be leading what we call the John Lewis National Day of Action for our democracy, for reparations, for everything. I hope people will get in them streets, okay?
Yes,
Let's
indeed.
do this. Let's do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Barbara Arnwine, the Executive Director of Transformative Justice Coalition, for joining us. I know you have to hop off and you're on your way to other jurisdictions, all like that. And again, welcome JoAnne Braxton, who just joined us. Again, I introduced her. She's the president of the Braxton Institute and representing reparations for Lakeland now. And our special guest has joined us now, Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, chair of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. We're so very thrilled to have you. So what we're going to do now is continue with the panel with the questions. And our special guest will make some special remarks before we open it up for a Q&A. So, Dr. Braxton, I just want to start with you with the next question, because actually I know you are involved specifically with local grassroots organizing in the state of Maryland, as is Robert Stubblefield and Dreisen as well. So I'm just curious for the panelists and remaining, how have communities in Maryland already begun engaging with the idea of reparations, and what grassroots work is happening on the ground? So, Dr. Braxton, I want to start with you, and I know that you have some other things you want to share as well that we will definitely get to as part of it. But right now, grassroots actions. I mean, I know you're the mover and shaker behind what's going on in Lakeland and what's happening in Greenbelt and the like. So go on and share with us briefly.
So I need folk to know who I am. I grew up in Lakeland in Prince George's County, Maryland, at 5508 Richmond Avenue, an address that doesn't exist anymore. I attended Lakeland Elementary School, received an excellent education in the care of Black teachers, graduates of Maryland's historically Black teachers' colleges. When integration came, I went to a mixed school when I was 12 years old, and I later earned a PhD in American Studies at Yale University, authoring the dissertation that became the book, Black Women Writing Autobiography, under the direction of historian John Blassingame. I am the descendant of Merkirk ironworkers through both my mother and my father. My mother was a lifelong resident of Lakeland. Her grandfather was one of the founders of our community. And what I can tell you is that in our journeys over the past few weeks, several of us were in California and Santa Cruz, and in our workshops where we were developing strategies. I argued that we come from different strains of traditions in African American culture. Some of us may come from a more talented 10th side, and some of us may have that kind of bias. And some of us come from the side of folks who have been required to make bricks without straw. And I'm from the folks who make bricks without straw. So what I argued among our colleagues in Santa Cruz, even though the folks who made bricks without straw sent me somewhere where I could get the education that I could be prepared for this moment, is that at every phase of our work as reparationists, it's important to address our constituencies, to go back and say, what is the help that will really help? So I want everyone to know that I signed the petition, and my signature stands on that petition. But after I signed the petition, I realized I was not practicing what I preached. So I went back to my community and I said, what is the help that will really help? And I have received information that I would not have received. And I have also written a letter to the governor that expresses my viewpoint and the viewpoint of my community in a more nuanced way. I couldn't agree more that there are false dichotomies. I agree with what Dreisen said. And so from the grassroots wisdom of my community and from the active participation of the leaders of the Lakeland Community Heritage Project and the Lakeland Civic Association, I have our letter to the governor, and that is what I am authorized to share with you today when the time is right. So we're linking Greenbelt and Lakeland, their connections. The ironworker community in Beltsville was shut out of being able to go to live in Greenbelt, which is between Lakeland and Merkirk and the Merkirk Iron Furnace. So you have Merkirk iron workers who are living in Greenbelt, living in Lakeland, having been shut out of the opportunity to be in Greenbelt. and multiple entities involved. It's very complicated. Even with all the commissions, we are going to have to look at who has the oversight for this work. And that is also covered in our letter, which I hope to be able to share with you before this meeting is over.
Okay, thank you so very much, Dr. Braxton. Robert, if you can just very briefly say what's happening on the ground, grassroots actions that you are involved in, and then Dreisen follow up, but very briefly, because we want to get to our special remarks, we want to get to the letter, and we definitely want to get to the audience with Q&A.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that my organization is doing is that we have crafted a comprehensive study and action plan for reparations for Montgomery County. And it's actually gotten widespread support from organizations across the state of Maryland, including organizations such as the Caucus of African American Leaders to Racial Justice Now, because quite frankly, we realize that we are the ones who are closest to the problem. Therefore, we're the ones that have the solution. So that's probably that's one of the things that we've done on the grassroots level, is that we realize the power that we have amongst ourselves. So the other thing that we've been doing, as well as connecting with other descendant groups across the state of Maryland to really help get legislation passed, which we were able to do this year to help protect our burial grounds. So those are just a couple of things we've done at the grassroots level. Just wanted to highlight that and pass over to Dreisen.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've seen significant grassroots organizing across Maryland for decades. And, what has not already been highlighted, I just want to shout out Beautiful Struggle, leaders of the Beautiful Struggle in Baltimore, who did a brilliant campaign around reparative justice for cannabis, and Baltimore voters did approve Question G in November of 2024, which created a community reinvestment and reparations fund. That was clear. The work of the state Maryland Lynching Commission is also incredibly important, building off of the work of the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project. I'm really thinking about these descendants' families who, Maryland Lynching Commission work has been going on for 6 arduous years. They're going to put out, and they have thought thoughtfully about what reparations could look like in relation to this type of discrete harm. Think of the families now who are seeing this message communicated from their governor around the veto, and how they are going to receive and then conceptualize what the reparations is going to look like if your governor is rejecting the state study. What type of communication is that sending to descendants of lynching victims who, have a clear right to a comprehensive remedy as well? And so, we need to be thinking about all the different efforts on all fronts. And I hope to also be able to give us a charge at the end of this to be coordinating across all the descendant groups, across all the efforts. I think that's the most effective way to reach the governor at this moment.
Okay, so thank you so very much. Well, as our time is getting really, really tight, what I want to do is call on Dr. Braxton. I don't know how long your letter is. If you could just kind of summarize and maybe put a link in the chat, and then I want to call upon our special guest for her remarks, and then we're going to open it up. So, Dr. Braxton, if you could just, again, I don't, I know it takes a little bit, it's a little different perspective. From the specific tone of this webinar. So I really want to give you that opportunity. But if you have it to be able to put in the chat, that would be good. So let me turn it over to you. And basically, it's if the government, if the veto is not overridden, or even if it is, what is it that you're saying that can or should be done now? I think that's what you were going to speak to.
So I'm not going to drop it in the chat. But if anybody wants a copy of it, you can write jbraxton@braxtoninstitute.org, and I'll be happy to share a copy with you. It went to the governor under the subject line, expanding the Just Communities Framework for a Reparative Vision for Maryland. That's the subject line, expanding the Just Communities Framework for a Reparative Vision for Maryland. And we're referencing Just Communities Framework in part because we have seen the baseline report, which acknowledges the removal of 104 of Lakeland's 150 homes. So if folks aren't familiar with that, I think it's worth taking a look at. I will give the 3 main points, and then I will step aside and be excited to listen to the delegate. The details are available to you in the form of the letter that comes up, as I said, from the Reparations for Lakeland Now team. So under expanding the Just Communities Framework for Reparative Vision for Maryland, we would like to see the expansion of that Just Communities Act into a Reparative Communities Act. And we respectfully propose broadening this framework and give some details as to how this would empower communities to co-develop reparative plans that include special taxing districts, expanded zoning authority, targeted housing and business investment, and culturally grounded educational opportunities, offering the state a powerful platform for justice-led development. That's point number 1. Point number 2, strengthen reparative justice oversight through the Attorney General's office. So we have the various commissions that have been mentioned, including localities such as Baltimore, College Park, and Greenbelt. But what happens when these harm reports come in? You have multiple entities that are responsible for the harm. Say, in our case, it's
we gotta
okay.
Yeah,
finally,
not too much detail. Yeah.
So we propose that the Attorney General's office be empowered with oversight and accountability. That's number 2. And number 3, we propose to facilitate the synergistic implementation of all of this work through a statewide commission. We encourage his office to reconsider the potential of a statewide reparations commission. And also, since he says that he's going to be back on Juneteenth to announce the next chapter of his work to end the racial wealth gap, I propose, this is my thought, that we also want to hear what he has to say on Juneteenth in terms of accountability measures. So that's it. Expanding just communities, strengthening reparative justice oversight, and facilitating implementation through a statewide commission. The letter is yours if you ask for it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so very much, Reverend Dr. JoAnne Braxton. And now it's our esteemed pleasure to bring before us Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, Chair of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus. The largest state legislative Black Caucus in the country with 64 members. She represents District 20 in the Maryland House of Delegates since 2017 and has been chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland since 2022. My dear sister, Jheanelle Wilkins, take it away from some special remarks, and then we're going to open it up for the Q&A.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for your tireless work. It is wonderful to be reconnected with Nkechi, my old friend, my good friend. And the one positive outcome of this is that we reconnected in this way around the issue of reparation. So again, good morning and good afternoon, actually, everyone. I'm Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. The Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland is comprised of all of the Black Black House and Senate members in the Maryland General Assembly. And we've been around since 1970, working to advocate for Black people in Maryland. We are the only caucus in Maryland focused in specifically on the Black community. And building on all of your shoulders, the grassroots work that was discussed, the leadership across the country on the issue of reparations, and really a call from the community, we included in our legislative agenda our priorities for the first time ever, the Reparations Commission. This bill and some versions of reparations have been introduced in the state of Maryland for 20 years. So this is 20 years of work. And finally, this legislative session, the Black Caucus, as we put together an agenda every single year and pass bills to impact and improve and transform the lives of Black Maryland. We passed 40 bills this term alone that specifically deal with improving Black Maryland, from Black maternal health to reducing prescription drugs, to the Second Look Act that passed this year that will look at resentencing and the oversentencing of Marylanders. But all of that is not enough. We decided that we have to address the issue of reparations. And that bill passed in one session after we prioritized it this year. I think it's important, this has probably been mentioned, but I think it's important for us to educate our communities because there's disinformation on this bill. This bill is not a study. It's not a study of reparations. This bill is a call to action to create a framework on how we implement and do reparations in the state of Maryland. The commission is required to put forth proposals for us to act upon so that the legislature can implement a reparations program in our state. This issue has never been addressed in the state of Maryland ever. Maryland has never, this is not something that we've done before. The Truth and Reconciliation around lynching was mentioned on this call. That is an absolutely important effort that the state has taken on to look at lynchings and do markers and really recognize the lives that were unjustly taken. There's also a commemoration on slavery years ago that resulted mostly in a website and sharing the legacy of slavery in Maryland. But those are the two main actions the legislature has ever taken, in addition to an apology, which I believe was in 2007. There's never before ever been any action on reparations until this legislation passed. And this was a top priority for the Legislative Black Caucus this year. So to speed all of this up, because I know we are short on time, where we are now is that the bill has been vetoed. We are very disappointed. We expressed our deep disappointment with it as a Black caucus. But at this point, there is nothing that can be done when it comes to the governor, although we'd love to change hearts and minds. As was mentioned, we expect him to issue some other actions that deal with racial wealth and other issues. But right now, it is in the hands, when we reconvene, whenever the legislature reconvenes, to override the veto. And the stance of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland is to override the veto. In terms of process, because it was the Senate bill that passed, the Senate bill will go back to the state Senate for the state Senate to act upon the veto first. So it's kind of in the ball is going to be the court, whatever that analogy is, the ball is going to be the court of the Senate. So I think some things that I would ask for, and thank you so much for all of the support, all of the energy. I'm so happy to know about this call and be a part of it, is that we want to shore up and make sure that, one, our senators who voted already yes for this bill, which I believe was every Democrat in the Senate, that they hear, the thank you and please override. It's important that members hear the support and hear that the public, the community, that the national Black movement is looking for an override. And we are strong on that. The Black senators are strong on it, but that support really helps. We're not scheduled to reconvene until January. That's a long time from now. We want to make sure that our members feel the support and the call for the override. Definitely still include House members because it will come over to us, hopefully at some point. But right now, the ball is going to be in the court of the House and Senate to conduct an override and consider an override on the bill, and that is the stance of the caucus for that to happen. I will pause there just with my many thank yous. And if you are here from other states, which I recognize a couple names that are here from other states, helping us to understand the national importance of this is also critical. Because honestly, we were thinking about this, Maryland, we got to get this done for our state, our community here, but it's really shown how much these actions are impactful to the nationwide movement and the critical importance of federal action as well as other states acting on this. So feel free to weigh in here with legislators in Maryland if you're in another state, because it really does show how important it is nationally. Now I'll stop there and thank you for including me.
So, Delegate, thank you so very much for that. The momentum on this specific issue has been vast. There have been over 100 people registered for this webinar, and nearly that number have actually signed in. I want to turn it over to my colleague, co-host Jessica Ann Mitchell Aiwuyor of the National Black Cultural Information Trust, who's going to walk us through the Q&A. Many of the questions have already been answered in the Q&A, but if you could kind of summarize some of that for the benefit of those who did not get those direct answers and any other questions. So again, thank you, everyone. Please don't go anywhere. Turn it back over to Jessica. Jam.
Sure. So basically, some of the main questions surround the veto. So number one, is there any like a internal pressure campaign to make the governor understand the importance of this legislation? And then number two, what will be done to make sure that there is going to be a legal commitment to reparations in the state with or without the override? If the override happens, how do we ensure that we do move forward with actual reparations? And if the override doesn't happen, how do we move forward? Delegate Wilkins, feel free to chime in.
I'll start with the second question. Without the override, there's no commission. So the structure in which reparations should take place in terms of who receives it, what the program looks like, and building the harm. And that's what I think is missing sometimes in the conversation for those who support the veto. That we have to build in this climate, in this political climate, we have to show harm and the impact and have empirical data in order to do a race conscious program. And so without having the commission, which is in charge with doing the research and creating that harm, and then also from that, identifying proposals, I think we're kind of back at square one. So the override really has to happen, and that should be the push. Right now, I feel very confident in us being able to do it. But again, we are not going back into session right now until January. There could, there's rumors about special session. I have no idea, depending on what's happening with the federal government. But without the commission, we really don't have the structure nor some of the research and data that we really need to demonstrate that harm to create the race conscious program.
Thank you so much. And a bunch of people are asking what's the best email or phone number to use to advocate for the override, and how can folks from out of the state of Maryland also support this cause?
Absolutely. So I will put, if I am able to put something in the chat, our Maryland General Assembly website that has every member on it and their contact information. And so that is the best way. We all have either looked at our emails ourselves or our staff. And so utilizing the email, I think, is the best way. Because we're not in session right now, phone may not be best, but I think sending emails to members, especially those who voted yes, which, and this is probably a nonpartisan event, but it's just a fact. It's just a fact that it is the Democrats that voted yes on the bill. I would focus in on them because I don't expect any friends across the aisle to switch their votes on an override. So I would say I'm putting this, if I'm able to send it to everyone, yes, I am. I'm putting this in the chat now, which has a list of the membership of the General Assembly, maybe starting with the Senate because the bill will start there. And I think it's a thank you for doing this. Please support the override.
Thank you so much. So can we go to so you said if there's no override, there's no commission. What happens if there's an override? Like if there's an override, how do we make sure that this isn't like a report collecting dust?
Sure. I think that sometimes there are reports and no action happens with it. But this caucus is really committed to seeing through. This is the state that has the largest Black caucus in the country. And quite frankly, after the way that we are fighting for this Reparations Commission, we are going to make sure that some strong efforts and proposals and programs come out of it. And that's why we are fighting so hard, right? Because we could just, all right, we tried and keep it moving, but that is not at all the posture that we are in. We want to see this through fully. And so I think that as we are working for override, we also need to start to vision what the membership looks like. If there are individuals that are based in Maryland, that when you look at the bill, you see a role on the commission that makes sense to start thinking about what that looks like. How can you help shape this commission and be a part of it? What are the things in the bill that you want to make sure are included in the conversation when the commission does meet? We should start visioning what that looks like. I think another thing to think about is that because the bill did not go into effect, it would have gone into effect this year. The commission's report was supposed to be in 2027. So now the timeline would be that immediately after overriding, the bill would go into law. The commission won't have much time because it says 2027. So realistically, right now, they would start in 2026. By the time you appoint all of those people, get the commission going, I mean, probably going to be in mid 2026, and the report is due in 2027. So I think that as much as we can vision and be ready to go, when it does go into place, will help us to be in a smoother place as well.
Nkechi, do you have any other thoughts or questions you wanted to ask?
I just want to ask everybody. We try to keep this to an hour. Sometimes we go a few minutes over. But just curious, just how can everyday people, not just legislators or lawyers, support the push to override the veto and advance reparatory justice in Maryland and beyond? Or even if you're not pushing to override, how can ordinary grassroots people advance reparatory justice, repair in the state of Maryland, just as we're closing out the panelists?
You can go ahead, Dr. Braxton.
I would really like to get someone from the legislature down to College Park, because when I started working actively for reparations for Lakeland now 2 years ago, folks couldn't even fix their mouths to say reparations. We've come a long way, and we learned that our efforts locally were not going to succeed unless there was a regional coalition, and we got connected to the reparations movement in the General Assembly. So what kind of outreach can you members who make a great impression on us when you are present in our communities come out and interact with folk who are actually powerfully moved by the work that you're doing, and see it as a channel for connecting things that they've been working at in disparate ways?
Absolutely. I think that we should absolutely figure out is it this interim of the Black Caucus and the members that are available to come out and really experience and learn from you and the decades of work that you've been doing on this issue and the community in College Park. We do visits all of the time. We actually have a town hall in Western Maryland on July 26th. Western Maryland has no Black representation outside of the U.S. Senate. And the community there, particularly NAACP, has asked us for a while now, come out to Western Maryland. We need that support and for you to come to our community. So we'll be there the end of the month for a visit. But in terms of, so that's a matter of us just scheduling and figuring it out. But in terms of the question about everyday people, we need everyone on this line to talk to their friends and family. Our community, I have seen, read the comments on social media and just various blogs and things like that. There is a need even within our community to continue to educate about what reparations is and why it's needed and why we don't have to make a choice between immediate actions to help our community, which again, our Black Caucus has an entire agenda of other policies that we've passed. We don't have to make a choice between reparations and this commission and immediate action taking place. And I think that the everyday conversations really help, because reparations to some people can sound like this radical thing that's never going to come to fruition. Why are we fighting for this? I don't want to study. I want to action right now. And those types of conversations between our family, our friends, our neighbors on what is actually going on and what this commission really is and why it's important also really helps. Because what happens if we override and much of the community is like, why are you overriding this? It's not meaningful and doesn't do anything, right? We still have to do the continued education work now that this issue is really bubbling up in conversations and in community.
So I really want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Barbara Arnwine, Executive Director of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Robert Stubblefield, organizer of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, Dreisen Heath, the convener of the Why We Can't Wait Network, Reverend Dr. JoAnne Braxton, president of the Braxton Institute and representing reparations for Lakeland now, and our special guest, Delegate Jheanelle Wilkins, chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. And of course, on behalf of my co-host, Jessica M. Mitchell Aiwuyor, the National Black Cultural Information Trust, and myself, Nkechi Taifa, Reparation Education Project, we want to thank everyone for joining this session of the Reparation Information Thought Series, a periodic strategic webinar dealing with reparations experts, racial justice leaders, and you. So again, thank you very much, everyone. This is recorded. The recording will be widely available for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.